everybody, I'm Danny Otto. Welcome into an all-new episode of That Recap Show. Now, normally this would be the part where I'd say major spoiler alert ahead, but we are on the journey towards the Deadpool and Wolverine movie, and along the way, we are going back and watching all of the past X-Men movies and Deadpool movies, and today we are recapping X-Men Days of Future Past. So without further ado, let's start the show!
Poppin' Off presents That Recap Show.
All right, joining with me to break down our favorite moments from X-Men Days of Future Past, it's Jon Jon Rico!
Hey!
Hello!
What's up?
Whew. You know, I mean, this is fun. And I'm not saying it like we're at the end. We're like, what, 2/3 through it at this point? But this is fun. Every time I look back, I'm like, oh, I'm enjoying kind of taking a stroll down memory lane, seeing some stuff that I hadn't really seen, some stuff that I had forgotten about. This is a fun little time.
Yeah, it's always fun to revisit stuff.
Yeah, and I like that we're doing it for this series so we can actually kind of break down, put some connections and context into certain movies and stuff. It's fun. It's fun. I'm having fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this is unlike First Class. And unlike, I guess X2, if we want to put that on the list, this is one that I've seen, but I did not remember much of. Like, I remembered like bits and pieces, like in the back of my mind when I was like, oh yeah, we've X-Men Days of Future Past coming up. Like, and it's not because I didn't like the movie, and there's just like, I remember parts, but I did not remember kind of all the connections and all of the scenes in this movie that I enjoyed. I enjoyed rewatching it. I mean, getting right into it, one of my favorite scenes is we kind of got the reverse fuck off scene in this one where we get, Charles saying fuck off to Logan when he's trying to like snap him back into
there.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say to you what you said to us then. Fuck off.
I loved having that. I mean, not only that, the sass continues, and this time it's from Xavier. But yeah, I mean, that's just one of the scenes. Like, I kind of remembered that, but I chuckled at it because like it kind of felt fresh because I hadn't really remembered that scene as much because I hadn't really rewatched in a really long time, and I if this kind of rewatch of all these movies does absolutely nothing else, it's reminding me of some of the movies that I wish I kind of had watched a little bit more, type of thing, because I am like, as we go back, I'm kind of enjoying them a lot. So it's one of those things where it's like, oh well, next time that I want to feel a little nostalgia, I might go back and put this on the list of movies that I want to rewatch and stuff like that. But yeah, I had definitely, I mean, we knew I was going to note that scene. not only the level of sass, but just because, yeah, we get the opposite of what we normally get from Logan, and we get Charles finally giving the fuck off to Logan. I just thought it was funny. But Rico, what were some of your instant reactions for Days of Future Past?
Yeah, it's always memorable too because like comic book movies weren't really, especially PG-13 ones, were never known for just like using that one use of the F-bomb that they're allowed in their movies, and superhero movies generally shied away from it because like one kid's just watching your heroes throwing around an F-bomb for no reason. But when it happens for a character like Logan, it always works. And if he's especially in a scene, it just works if another character is just telling him to fuck off, especially, which I thought was funny. But it also kind of paves the way because again, Fox the Fox X-Men movies were kind of the only ones kind of doing that. They're kind of dipping their toes at a time. Sometimes some DC movies would kind of throw one in there now and then, but Really, it was just this was like the only kind of like Marvel property that was doing it at the time. We would get much later on, like only last year or so, with Guardians 3. So, and that was they made a big deal out of that. So
That
you
was
could
the first one.
that's how you know, yeah, in the MCU, yeah. But that's like the one that they kind of make a big deal out of that whenever it does happen in these prominent superhero franchises. So that is kind of a funny aspect of these movies because they used it pretty liberally in the last few movies, going back to one First Class and then the Wolverine, and now this. Like we're getting a nice little 1, 2, 3 punch of them using it back to back to back. So I thought that was really cool. But man, this is one of my favorite movies in the entire franchise. It's just kind of it feels kind of like the end game of the franchise because you're bringing in this big kind of like love letter to the entire franchise as a whole because you're bringing in the old cast and the new. Some are used more better than the others. But at the same time, the fact that you're kind of achieving this monument, this is a big thing at the time too, because it's 2014. Again, the same year as like a Winter Soldier and Guardians,
Mm.
where like we were not used to seeing like kind of these two casts from two different franchises kind of like meld together like this. So they were kind of doing it before everybody else in a sense. So that's always really cool, and the way they have to kind of like juggle all these cast members and these storylines is they do it in actually a pretty solid way. I love the use of the Sentinels in the beginning of the Sentinels program and the way we see kind of like the beginning stages and also the evolved stages of the Sentinels.
Yeah.
Because the evolved Sentinels are just terrifying to me. Just kind of watching them in those future scenes is just pretty wild. But also the way they work it into the story with Mystique and all that is really awesome. It utilizes Wolverine in a way that makes a lot of sense by having him be the one to time travel back. Because in the original comic book story, it's actually Kitty Pryde, the one who actually transfers him back,
Mhm.
that sends him back in time. But the way they explain it with him being like the only one that was able to physically make the trip makes a lot of sense. So I really do like that. And even then, it's still treated like an ensemble piece. Like it's not him leading every single scene in the storyline. It's actually it becomes a focus on Charles and Magneto and Mystique, of course, like that younger cast, and just getting to see Logan with that cast in general, like kind of going on that tease that we do get in First Class is just
Yeah.
really cool. But yeah, it just feels like an actual X-Men show that or an X-Men movie rather than just like Wolverine and the X-Men, which that's also a great animated show. I've never seen that show. But yeah, I just like that they had this tough task of bringing these two really like big casts together and they hit like knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing that was kind of cool, and I guess kind of going along the theme where you said this was kind of like Endgamey, Infinity War, is because they were dealing with different times. They could kill off a whole bunch of people at like in the like present slash future timeline of those characters. So we
Yeah.
just see like everyone dies. Like we just
Oh
get
yeah, Storm goes out brutally, man.
I
It's just
know.
like
So in a
some of them
way,
die multiple times
yeah.
too, which is kind of a cool premise of it. Yeah, it's wild.
So, but yeah, like that kind of goes along with what you were saying, comparing it to like an Endgame or an Infinity War, where like we knew that there's hope because we have Logan in the past, kind of changing events and hopefully rewriting over what's happening right now.
Yeah,
But
assembling these
because
cast members. Yeah,
yeah, because they did that, it was free game to just like let's just kill everybody.
yeah,
Like,
and it's a really well done time travel story too that really puts stakes on both like the past and the future, like it's future past and like they actually like make that story like because the original Days of Future Past story is only like 2 issues. It's actually a really short story,
oh wow,
and I think they actually flesh this out into like a lot more meaningful story. And the way again, just like in First Class, the way they incorporate real history into it is really great. The way they explain that Magneto's responsible for JFK's murder and stuff like that. I just love the way they're able to incorporate those aspects into the movie.
right.
And yeah, I just thought they did it with flying colors.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I said it in the past of in one of the recaps. I think it was First Class where I love when they can kind of shape a part or an aspect of something from the movie into like a real life
Mhm.
historic event type of thing. And I love how we get Magneto's explanation is he was trying to save JFK. He was actually bending the bullets to get it
Yeah,
away because
yeah, the way they play
JFK
into
is
like
a
the
mutant.
theories, yeah, and then yeah, it's really fun how they use the whole X-Men lore to kind of work it into the history for sure.
Yeah, that was definitely a really cool aspect. But you want to get to some big takeaways?
Mhm.
Awesome. All right, I'm gonna kick off big takeaways just to like look, show some love to Quicksilver, to Quicksilver, like, but in general, I think Evan Peters is great as in his role as Quicksilver, and
Yeah.
I mean, I'll get more into that with predictions and stuff like that, which are like stuff that I'm hoping to see kind of moving forward. But man, I every time I see there's multiple of them, not in this particular movie, but over the course of a couple different X-Men movies that we still haven't gotten to yet.
Mhm.
We get some of these really cool Quicksilver scenes where they slow things down to really demonstrate
Yeah.
how fast he is, like how fast he's actually
Just
moving.
showing his speedster's powers. Yeah.
Right. And I like that in general. Like, I mean, I know both of us have watched, many seasons of the CW's Flash, and there's
Oh yeah.
scenes where they do that too. And I think when it's done really well in like context of what's happening, I think it's really cool. And I'm always like really like into those scenes. But in this particular one, I absolutely I love the slow-mo Quicksilver scenes. I
Oh
like
yeah. This is the
Quicksilver.
one that really hit with fans for sure.
Right. I love Evan Peters' take on Quicksilver in general, just because like he's just got the right attitude of like I like when they're like I didn't do anything. I was here all day. Like you can't prove it. Like I just
Yeah,
like
it's quirky. It's fun and
yeah.
quirky.
I just love that aspect of it. I mean, and we're coming from already have seen, MCU's take on Quicksilver and kind of how he was, and which is funny because they were
Yeah.
both in Kick-Ass, which was awesome together. But yeah, I don't want to step over kind of what my spitballing / predictions is, but I just wanted to during my takeaways to just kind of point out that I love when they do the slow mo when it's done right. And I think this is one thing that the Fox not that they didn't do, many good things
Oh, they
during
do.
the
Yeah, there's a lot
duration.
of stuff that they did. There's a lot of hit and misses. Let's just
Right.
yeah.
But I think this is definitely a hit.
A hit.
Like not only, Evan Peters as Quicksilver, I think that was really good casting, but also these slow-mo scenes that they do with his character, I think are
Mhm.
great. I love them. I
Yeah.
love every single one
Time in
of
the
them.
bottle, use of time in the bottle is just
Right.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But Rico, what were some of your takeaways from Futures Past?
Yeah, I love that scene too. Again, we're because you also kind of bring it up, bringing up shows like the Flash and stuff like that, and even like the Ezra Miller Flash from the Snyderverse. Like later on, you would see. I just like seeing different takes on a speedster's powers, and I think every single time we see a different character with it, it's always done differently to its own degree. Like even the MCU Quicksilver has like a different style of speedster. Like he's got that cool little streak that goes like the little
Yeah,
silver streak that kind of follows him. And then, of course, the way the Flash is done is a little bit more TV based, but it still looks really cool for how it is. And
yeah,
just the way, like, you're always going to show them like moving amongst people who are standing still. And that's always going to be like the cool way to do it. But I like where you can always add your own element too. So yeah, I enjoyed that. And the way that he kind of uses that and to build momentum on people to force them to like hit each other and stuff like that.
yeah,
Like he's creating the scenarios before it happens. So it's really playful. So yeah, it's yeah, and especially coming right off of Age of Ultron, I think the year before, we do get like a different. It's a very different sense because I think Quicksilver in general is just more of a serious character, so to get like this quirky version that doesn't have like a Wanda with them and stuff like that. What he does kind of has a little bit,
you
or
see him.
we don't know if that's a little Wanda for a little Polaris, which that remains to be seen. But the fact that he's got a little sister there too is just kind of like a little hint at like what they do. So yeah, I just like how they play off of that. So yeah, I really enjoy Evan Peters in that role in general. There's a couple scenes I want to talk about before I get to like my main favorite one. The one I want to talk about is actually Magneto's speech when he brings the stadium down at the White House and he actually brings out the bunker and all that. And he puts all the cameras on them and he does that motivational speech to kind of create the Brotherhood of Mutants, right?
Mhm.
It's kind of like that whole thing. But the way it kind of again, I've been doing a lot of callbacks to X-Men 97 while doing this rewatch because every single time I do that, I'm like, oh, okay, I could see, like, I just kind of watched them do something similar in X-Men 97. And it's kind of nice to see that, like, these movies were doing that in some form or another. But he's just kind of making that way of just showing, like, we could have killed you today, but we gave you a glimpse of the power that we had. And it kind of reminds me of that, the second episode, I think, when they're at the UN. And he brings them all up into the sky and he's like,
Mm,
don't make me let you down or whatever it is, that whole
yeah.
thing. It kind of gave me a little bit of like that kind of feeling because the same thing. He puts the cameras on them and he kind of puts out this message out to the world. So I do like that whole aspect. And I also do like how inevitably he just does turn back into like the bad guy. Essentially, like his actions are inevitably what's going to be like what destroys the entire mutant race. Essentially, but hands down, my favorite scene in the entire movie will always be basically when Xavier decides to get his mojo back, basically, and he goes into Cerebro, but he's not fully there yet. But then he gets that pep talk from Logan, which is also a great moment because I just always like the character dynamic between Xavier and Logan in general. So just kind of getting like that motivation from Logan to Xavier in a time of need was just really cool. But getting to this point where he actually is able to send himself to the future, essentially, and have this interaction with his older self, older Xavier. So seeing James McAvoy and Patrick Stewart face to face as the same character was also probably one of the big things that drew me to this movie. Just again, just knowing that these two casts were going to be together. But when I remember seeing in the trailer, just seeing those two face to face, you're just like, what is happening? Like, what are they going to do? And I think it's a fucking beautiful scene. That's all. I'll just say it like that. But I think all of us in some way or another would love to kind of like get some advice from our older selves in times of doubt to kind of get some reassurance. And I think especially like I don't fully agree with the character arc of Xavier being like this struggling kind of a struggling addict essentially who's kind of given up. But it ultimately does lead to a beautiful character arc and this great moment between them. And I think it perfectly captures the emotional depth that these movies are really capable of having. I think we even get more of that later on with Logan, of course. Like I think that's kind of like the peak of the emotional depth of those movies are able to bring out, even when they weren't always perfect, right? So like even for like even some of the shortcomings that they have, but we have moments like this. The speech between or the moment between Xavier and Magneto with the satellite on in first class. Those are the moments to me that really like resonate and make the rewatches really worth it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, all of the scenes that you mentioned were absolutely awesome. And I mean, what's crazy is, and I don't remember if I had the same thought when I actually watched this movie the first time, but like this movie could have been solved so much quicker if Magneto, even like past Magneto, wasn't as I don't even know if the right words are brash or just headstrong or whatever. Because immediately he's going to take out I guess at that point is it
Mystique.
Raven? Yeah,
What?
well, I was gonna say Raven because
Yeah.
I know they were calling her Raven in that scene, but yeah, it's Mystique. But yeah, had they just like brought her in and been like, hey, we just got to let you know, like, this is the bad way to do this. He's from the future. Like, you know what I mean?
It's a good way of showing again the dynamic of Xavier and Magneto too. The way he's always going to go to the extreme, and I mean, again, X-Men '97, we saw the guy make a whole asteroid, just out of pretty much pure reaction, and of course, it's always going to be those two the philosophies colliding at the end of the day, which I think it's cool when it comes to the Raven character, because again. I think another thing that this movie does really well is actually showing how the Patrick Stewart Xavier has a relationship with the Mystique, because we don't really get to see him interact much with the Rebecca Romaine Mystique, the one from the past movies. So kind of establishing that relationship has like a history. And there was a point in that relationship where she stopped becoming like the Raven that he knew and just full on Mystique from there. I think that was a really cool story thing that and also brought this cool little it was the catalyst of that philosophy debate that, how do we handle this person that one I grew up with or this person that like you just come to know later on in life kind of thing. So yeah, I think it was really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, if we're going along the lines of kind of jumping back and forth, I love the ending of this movie when we finally get our Logan waking back up in the present that he has changed.
The new timeline, yeah.
Right. And he has no idea what's happening. Jean is still alive. Scott is still alive. Like everybody's still around. And they call him Professor. And he's like, I think they called him Professor because he was teaching. And he walks in.
Yeah, don't you have a history class to get to? I think that's what he calls him. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he finally, I guess, says the right thing to Charles. And Charles goes, "You're back."
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we have a lot to catch up on. Oh, okay.
And then he's like, "What do you last remember?" He goes, "Drowning." Okay, that's also the way, like the way they take him out of the picture so that the rest of the cast can kind of have their moment when he
Right.
first of all, it's brutal the way he puts the rebar through him, which again reminded me of the whole animanium scene from X-97.
Holy shit! Yeah.
But then he just yeets him all the way to the lake, and then like that's the end of Wolverine.
And it's Mystique as Stryker
Yeah,
that
that's a very interesting thing that they kind of set up, and it's not really paid off. There's a couple things they set up that they don't really like kind of pay off, and it's just like, how does that really work? But just like you just kind of accept it because it's really fun. Yeah, but I thought that was very interesting as well.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could go on and on. I mean,
Great
this movie
movie.
had some really great scenes in it, and a lot of stuff that we could definitely talk
Peter
about.
Dinklage is Bolivar Trask too. I think he's very fascinating to watch in this as well.
Yeah,
The
he
way he
is.
the way he says the way he admires mutants, but he's also wants to do terrible things to them. It's just like what the heck, man. It's just so, and he's Peter Dinklage, so you can't not love him.
Yeah. He makes a good villain. Yeah,
He really does.
It's really good. Before we get too far into it, do you want to get to some predictions?
Sure.
Awesome. All right, why don't you kick off predictions?
Okay. So one of the things I kind of wish we got more of in this movie, or at least even like maybe like a setup movie or something like that, we don't really get much of like the future team. Or like we're either like at the very beginning of the Sentinel program where it could, like it's the kind of the beginning of the fall, or we're in the future we get like very small glimpses of basically the very end, which is just not it's not good at all. But I really would have liked to seen a little bit more like of like the in between of that, like some of the years between like some of the events that led to some of the other members that didn't make it to the future dying or stuff like that. I just think that would have been a fun little thing to explore. And another thing, we get some really cool characters in the future that we only really get to see, I guess, like die to Sentinels. Essentially, they're essentially the last line defense. Like that's how the future X-Men are kind of looked at. And they kind of just have this mission of just going place to place and resetting their chances of escaping. But we get characters like Bishop, Warpath, Sunspot, who's another. I'm going to bring up X-Men 97 a lot, I feel like. But Sunspot's the character we just saw in X-Men 97, so it makes it a little bit more familiar. We're like, who is that guy? Like, oh yeah, we just saw him. It's Roberto. So that's really cool. And then a character called Blink, which is really awesome. And I also love that. I think that the future scenes are probably the best use of like the mutant team up powers ever. Like the way they use Blink's teleports to use their powers. Like I love the one scene where she launches Colossus down from the sky and then creates another portal and launches them into a Sentinel. There's some really great slow-mo portal scenes between her where they kind of show her diverting Sentinel strikes, and it's just like really well done stuff. I remember watching it in the theater just being like, wow, this is really really cool stuff that they're doing here with like the powers and the display of like the team ups and stuff like that. But we get a little bit of Blink in the short-lived series The Gifted. She actually is like a character on the show. She's played by somebody else, but she's got the same kind of look. She has the same powers and stuff like that. But I feel like some of those characters that we see get killed, and I guess essentially left in some kind of a void because they become a part of a race timeline. You can make an argument that we could probably see some of them in the void and sometime in Deadpool and Wolverine. I think those characters kind of fit like that little one-off cameo, especially a character like a Warpath or a Sunspot. I think those would be kind of cool. They're kind of smaller name actors that you could bring back. I think actually the actor who played Sunspot might have passed away. So I might need to double check that. But you could bring in the Sunspot character, Bishop for sure. I think Bishop would be a really cool character to see. Yeah, but I think now I think it makes a lot more sense just because that timeline doesn't exist. You can actually like story wise, it makes sense to have them in something like the Void. So yeah, as far as like the whole spitballing thing and seeing where we can see some of these characters pop in the MCU, I think some of those future mutants would be really really cool. And we get some other cool characters in the past too, like the new version of Toad, which looks really creepy. But we already know we're getting Ray Park, and I think if you had both of them be like almost like, I guess you could have mutants who have the same power set, but they're not the same person. So it'd be like, oh wait, we have two Toads. Like, so I kind of want to see something like that, like this, because just kind of fix some of the little plot holes they always throw in there, and just because I think Deadpool is really great at acknowledging plot holes too. So it'd be kind of fun to be like, okay, which one are we doing right there? Just like in the first movie, like the timelines are confusing.
Yeah, I mean, going on basically along the same lines as far as spitball, and for me that you were kind of doing was, I mean, we had a tease in the MCU of Evan Peters Quicksilver.
He was kind of the first.
Yeah, in the WandaVision series, basically. So
Ralph Boner.
yeah, Ralph Boner.
Hmm.
I would love to see, Evan Peters as the real Quicksilver somewhere in there. Now, if I could have everything go perfect, I would love to see Evan Peters make it over to the MCU as Quicksilver.
Hmm.
And this would be the movie, obviously, for it to happen in would be, Deadpool and Wolverine, since, I think we're all predicting that this, by the end of it, is going to be, Deadpool in the MCU, like being dumped off into the real main MCU timeline type of thing. And hilarity assumes, or hopefully. But
I can see a moment with the two Quicksilvers, and it also make it like a kick-ass reunion.
that would be cool.
Yeah, and because I think at the end of the day, you have to acknowledge that Wanda could still somewhere be out there somewhere, and if you bring in somehow Evan Peters Quicksilver comes in and he's a part of that world, like he crosses over somehow, I bet she would not be happy. She's like, wait, this is that Ralph Boner guy.
Yeah, I think that would be awesome.
That is, just for the whole confusion.
I'm definitely here for that. I think that would be hilarious. But yeah, I love Evan Peters as Quicksilver. No hate on the was it Aaron Taylor?
Johnson,
yeah, that's it. No hate on his Quicksilver. I think he was very good in Age of Ultron as Quicksilver. It was just, seeing two different takes on Quicksilver. Obviously, I'm going to like one more than the other. And I think in this circumstance, I really did enjoy Evan Peters' take on it, because it is that kind of more of a jokey. I think he plays off of other things. And I think he would have played off really well on that Avengers team too. Like if we had, like have him kind of being like as like a wise ass, a little bit younger than everybody else type of thing.
Yeah, that was always the thing when you're watching these movies. You're just like, man, just imagine if like that Wolverine was just talking to Cap right now, like or like something like that. Like it's just like it fits so well, but it's just like they're two separate things. They're like, we need them over here. And now we're finally here, and it's just like, how can we work it in? Do we start new? Do we bring in some of the old? Do we mix in some of both? I think Quicksilver is such an interesting character along with Wanda, because they were characters that were brought over before the X-Men. I can't remember how the whole rights situation worked when it came to them. I don't know if it was like a trade or something like that. But I think that's what also makes it tricky, because like even if you wanted to bring in the X-Men, like a new version of all the cast, those would be two characters you couldn't recast because they're already established, and it makes it really hard to work it in like a Magneto story, and or unless they're going to find a way to work in Magneto into Wanda's story somehow, and so it's, oh my gosh, there's so many different ways.
I mean,
those characters.
the best part about it, and it kind of is the best reason that comic books work so well, is because there's so many different parallel universes and so many different things happening at the same time, and they just kind of make the cover slightly different. Like, you know what I mean? Like they'll have Ultimate Alliance, and they'll have this, and they'll have that, and it's just, this is a different story arc with different characters. Some things are the same, but some things are going to be a little different. So now we're in that age with the MCU, basically, where we have, the multiverse and everything like that. So we can do that. Like, I don't know if it's confirmed yet, but some of the rumors for Fantastic Four is they're not in our main MCU.
Yeah, they're confirmed to be in a different universe.
Okay, yeah. So that's why we can get this fully fleshed out Fantastic Four team, and then somehow they're in the MCU all of a sudden. It hasn't just been like, oh, nobody paid attention to them. Magically, they're here now. Like, we get all of this backstory. We can still get all this backstory in history because they were in a parallel universe and stuff like that. And somehow something crosses paths. They get pulled over to the MCU, and they can explain that, and they can make it make sense in universe. And then we have our team. But we can still have solo movies where they were there, so we can get their backstory, we can get kind of the origin, we can get everything there to get used to the characters before we pull them into the main MCU timeline for Secret Wars and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So
I guess it would be a lot more clear, well, especially after Deadpool and Wolverine, but also I think it'll be a lot more clear after Secret Wars. Is probably whatever happens to the timeline from there is going to be the big, like whatever we're going to do from there is going to be the big answer.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard some people saying they're thinking it's going to be a soft reboot where things are going to, events had happened, but some characters might be shuffled a little bit. We might have characters that had passed away. We might have the alternate version of that character is here now, played by a different person, because that's just what happened. Everything got mixed. with the Secret Wars. The end of Secret Wars basically causes everything to kind of get shuffled a little bit. So, you know, characters that had passed away might not have really passed away, and characters that, you know, were played by one actor might be played by a younger actor next time, type of thing. So so that they can continue with the franchise. But yeah, I mean, I'm like I started this video with, I'm really enjoying this stroll down memory lane as we kind of get closer and closer. Like I'm excited now. We're in July. I'm so excited for Deadpool and Wolverine.
The build up is real now. We're really in hype mode.
Now we're getting to the and we're not only that, we're gonna get our first recap of one of the first Deadpool movies.
Yeah, we're finally in the Deadpool movies in July, which makes it perfect.
The next few movies we have to recap are big ones. Like we get Deadpool 1. I never saw Apocalypse. I know.
Get the tease in this the post credit scene in this is a pretty cool tease, and I remember watching that being like, oh dang, they're doing that. And then we got, but it's still there's some stuff to enjoy for sure. Yeah. I'm excited to rewatch it. Actually, it's been a few years.
That I never watched Apocalypse, but then we get Logan, which is it's gonna be so heavy. And then we get Deadpool 2, and then Deadpool 3's right there, like right around the corner.
They'll be right there, yeah.
Oh man,
perfect.
But anyway, I know. But anyway, as we always say, that's what we think. Let us know in the comments below. What did you think of X-Men: Days of Future Past? Do you remember, I guess, seeing it in the theaters, or is this one of the movies on your rewatch list to kind of get ready for Deadpool and Wolverine? And what characters are you hoping, you know, pop up in the void? I mean, there really are no wrong answers. Just like what Rico said. I mean, any of the characters that kind of were kind of vanished out of the creation of the new timeline at the end of this movie, I mean, all of those are fair game. We could see anybody pop up. And as always, don't forget, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to hear about all of our latest audio and video podcast releases. Bye, everybody!
Poppin' Off presents That Recap Show.